Hi team, it's Richard here from Link, and I just wanted to share with you a client email that I'm sending following a meeting with John and Mary last week, name change for privacy reasons obviously, because I think it's a good case study in explaining the answer to one of the most common questions we have in terms of what is the value of actually working with a financial advisor. A lot of people think it's just superannuation insurance or it's just buying shares or whatever it might be. The true answer is the value we provide is help you understand what are your actual options in terms of helping you grow your wealth and understand how each of those options actually works for your unique financial position and what is the best strategy for you, because the strategy that worked for your uncle or your mate or your colleague at the barbecue might have worked really well for them, might be completely incompatible though for you. So following the herd of what have everyone else done, that's all well and good, but it may not work for you. It's much better to have a tailored strategy that's specific to your particular needs. So I've got John and Mary here, and they wanted to establish a clear roadmap with clear goals that they can work towards around two main key financial goals. One is they want to ultimately establish a self-managed super fund in which they can buy a commercial premises to house their business in. So John runs his own business while Mary works full-time separately to that, but obviously helps in the business. And they also want to buy their long-term dream forever family home in the next 5 years. So that's moving from their existing property. And they want to obviously balance these goals with the fact that they're planning on starting a family immediately, and they want to have a large family. So, 3+ kids potentially. So obviously thinking about what is the cost of all of that from education expenses, et cetera, as well as the fact that Mary does want to take 12 months out for maternity leave when she does have her child. So that's potentially quite a lot of time out of the workforce in the future. So their current position is they operate their business through a family trust structure, which was established here by our Link Advisors team on the accounting side of things, which offers really good asset protection, but also offers quite a few tax flexibility. So some strategies that can be potentially done there. Their current home is currently worth about $1.3 million with about a $600,000 debt, but they are currently investing into that property, doing some renovations, which they believe is going to boost the value of that property up to somewhere around the $2 million mark, which will help them take the next step into that long-term forever home, which will be somewhere north of $3 million for what they want. They do have a really strong surplus cash flow position. It is theoretical, obviously. This is if they followed their budget to their T. They could potentially be saving around $86,500, but you have to consider, obviously, there's lifestyle costs like holidays and so forth and so on that will inevitably reduce that surplus a little bit. And as I mentioned, obviously, intention to start a family soon. So we discussed these competing objectives with them. And so the first one was, well, how do we get to where we need to be for the superannuation side of things? So the minimum sort of balance that they need to be looking at to establish an SMSF from a cost value perspective is probably around $500,000. It's probably going to actually need to be a little bit more than that depending on the size of the commercial premises they want to buy, but $500,000 is a good target to be working towards. And what we found is if they continued as they currently are, just putting their super guarantee contributions in, they're quite a way short of that 500 mark at the moment, so it's going to take them a bit over 10 years to get there. Whereas if they take advantage of what they call concessional contributions, so contributing via salary sacrifice on a pre-tax basis, up to the cap each year, we won't go into carry forward and all the rest of it today, just to keep it simple. They can effectively halve that and get to the target balance that they want to get to within 5 years. So that's one strategy, which is obviously going to eat into a little bit of that surplus cash flow. And then the other things we discussed was property and the benefits and disadvantages of that versus using that equity to potentially buy shares via a debt recycling framework as well. And what does that look like? So the two options we compared is one, buying an investment property worth about $1 million. We used an income yield or a rental yield, I should say, of 4%. And holding costs, so obviously your interest on your mortgage, but also things like rates and insurance and maintenance and management fees, etc., around $15,000 a year plus the interest on the loan. So we're effectively using the equity in their home to borrow 105% to buy that investment property. Why 105%, not 100%? Because the 5% covers things like stamp duty. The alternative is the shares. Okay, they could use that same equity, but because they don't have the ability to leverage a second property, they could only get out about $350,000 to put into shares. So what's the advantages and disadvantages there? Obviously, with $1 million property, if you assumed a 7% capital growth rate, which is what the Brisbane market at least has done historically, you're getting that 7% return on $1 million. Whereas with shares, if we assume the same return, you're only getting that same, say, 7% return on $350,000. So obviously, you're getting a lot more growth with the property than in shares. So over a 10-year period, you can see that inevitably the investment property is going to yield the higher net asset position over time. However, the gap isn't as big as you would think it is. It's actually only around $100,000. And the reason is the surplus cash flows. The investment property with those $15,000 of holding costs plus higher interest on the loan, it actually is going to cost them about $25,000 a year more to have that strategy over the next 10 years, as opposed to the share strategy, which is much more cash flow neutral in nature. So you can see the difference here in the amount of surplus cash flow they have. Now, all things being equal, they can afford the investment property, so they could afford that strategy. However, remember, they're about to start a family. So Mary taking that time out of the workforce, while they've got that $86,500 surplus cash flow, that's going to be all but wiped out in the short term. So the ability to afford that additional $25,000 a year in holding costs is really compromised with the fact that they're about to start a family. And so for that reason, they're actually probably better off delaying the investment property side of things and focusing on just the superannuation and saving towards that $3 million forever home over the next 5 years while they start their family, but not let that equity in their home go to waste. Still use that equity, but in a more cash flow neutral way via a debt recycling share program. And so that, for them, is actually the much better strategy to be following. As I said, if you're speaking to another client the next day, it could be a completely different result we come to. We could find that the investment property is the better approach, and we would help them establish that strategy instead. But this is the value that we provide. You can listen to all the financial influencers on TikTok that you like. You can listen to your work colleagues, your mates, everything. At the end of the day, what worked for them may work for you, but it may not work for you. You need to develop a strategy that is specific to your specific financial position, and that is what we do for people here at Link.